We now come to the statement. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This morning in Downing Street, I met some of the mothers and adult adoptees harmed by historic adoption practices in England. They are here with us in the gallery today. And I had the chance to talk with them privately. They are the most remarkable women, and I know the whole House will want to join me in paying tribute to the extraordinary courage with which they have shared their harrowing testimonies and fought for the truth time and time again. Yeah. I have to confess, as I said to them this morning, I found it hard to read the testimonies and to hear their stories. I found it particularly hard as a dad. How much harder it must have been for them to go through that, to set out their testimonies and tell their stories over and over again. As they said to me this morning, something which is so intensely private, having to be public, and the courage and resilience they have shown, and others alongside them, is absolutely incredible, and I want to mark that. Mr. Speaker, what happened to them and to tens of thousands of mothers, children and families should never have happened. It is a stain on our history. Mothers, many young, vulnerable and without support, were coerced, bullied or misled into feeling that they had no choice but to have their children taken away from them. What a thing to do. And, Mr. Speaker, these were not isolated or accidental acts. They were practices embedded within systems across local authorities, across voluntary and faith-based institutions, and in health and social care services, including parts of what is now the NHS. All institutions that operated with power over people's lives. Yet they did so without compassion, without consent, and without dignity or proper safeguards. Mr. Speaker, these practices were particularly prevalent between 1949 and 1976, but also extended beyond those years. In some cases, women, including those placed in mother and baby homes and other institutional settings, were cut off from their families, relationships, education and employment, and subjected to harsh and isolated conditions. Some experienced treatment that amounted to exploitation and abuse. Mr. Speaker, many were made to feel ashamed, and that came through very, very powerfully in the discussions I had this morning. Silenced and unworthy of care or dignity. Children grew up believing that they were unwanted. Young mothers were told that they were immoral and that their babies would be better off without them. And again, as they told me this morning, that lasts a lifetime and has a huge impact. Anne Lloyd Keane, here in the gallery, and of course formerly of this House, described to the Education Committee how she was stitched without anaesthetic and said, and I quote, that she was told, "You will remember the pain because you've been a bad girl." Mr. Speaker, many of those harmed in this way feel a gut-wrenching sense of shame, and Anne and others have said that stayed with her and that she still feels it today. And I know that this apology will not be able to lift that completely. It will help a little, I hope, but it won't lift it completely. And today I say to Anne, to everyone here in the gallery with us, to all those impacted and affected, wherever they are in the country, and there are many, many thousands of them, including some who still have not been able to speak about what happened to them to this day. And I hope that this statement, this apology, perhaps gives some of them the confidence to speak about what happened to them, because it will help in a small way. But I say this, the shame is not yours. The shame was never yours. The shame is ours. And I say that on behalf of the whole country, I say it to every single person impacted. We are deeply and profoundly sorry. To the mothers who were told they were unfit, who were prevented from caring for the children they desperately wanted to help and to keep, and who've carried this loss for decades. To those who were not given the information they needed to provide informed consent, who faced pressure or coercion, and who experienced practices that were unethical. To the sons and daughters, the children who are now adults, who through pressure and coercion within these systems were taken from their families, denied their identity, their history, and sometimes their safety. To those who grew up believing that they were unwanted, some of whom were even told directly that they were second class. To those who've carried a burden of loss, confusion and stigma, or who experienced neglect and abuse without the protection or oversight that should have been their right. To those who've experienced lifelong uncertainty, loss, or questions about identity and belonging, or whose mental and physical health, relationships, and sense of self across their lives has been affected. To the fathers who are denied a voice, excluded from decisions, or separated from their children. To the siblings, grandparents, partners and extended family, and future generations who've lived with the consequences of these practices. To those who experienced harm from these practices, even while being brought up in loving homes by their adoptive parents. To those who were adopted across borders or cultures, who lost connections to their heritage, racial and personal identity. And to those from ethnic minority backgrounds who experienced racism or were treated differently within these systems, and who, as a group, were less likely to be adopted or to grow up in stable family homes. Mr. Speaker, I'm struck by the words of Debbie Irumli, who I met this morning. She says she was raised with racist views towards her own biological family. Mr. Speaker, how do you even begin to comprehend that? To each and every one of those affected, we say a deep and heartfelt sorry. Mr. Speaker, let me be clear and unequivocal. These harms were compounded by the actions and failures of the state. Governments funded, enabled and relied on systems that were not consistently or effectively overseen. The state did not prevent harm from continuing. The state bears responsibility for the systems it funded and legitimised, which enabled these practices to occur. The state did not do enough to protect mothers, children and families from harm. And for this systemic failure, I am truly sorry. Mr. Speaker, many of those affected have suffered a further injustice. They've had to fight for the basic human right to know their own story. As Sally Ells has put it, we are treated as if the information about our own lives does not belong to us. Debbie was told her birth mother's life would be in danger if she tried to search for her. Barriers put in place at every twist and turn. Records have in some cases been lost, altered, or not made fully accessible to those seeking answers. And the whole process is painfully slow, traumatic, and dehumanising all over again. Mr. Speaker, we do say sorry, and we mean it. But sorry is not enough. This must also be the start of real change, working with those affected and their families to improve access to records and to provide the care and support that people need. So today I can tell the House we will fund the development of a national online resource, creating a single access point to locate records wherever they may be held across the country. We will consult on requiring existing records to be retained for 100 years, so they will remain available across the lifetime of those affected. And my right honourable friend, the Education Secretary, is today writing to local authorities, regional adoption agencies and voluntary adoption agencies, setting out the expectation that requests for records should be responded to swiftly and with compassion and consistency. And we will expand access to funded intermediary services, with particular focus on pre-1976 cases where access to support is currently most limited. We will establish national virtual peer-led support groups for mothers and adopted adults to improve access to ongoing trauma-informed support across the country. And we will work with NHS England to ensure those affected are taken seriously when they seek help. This includes new support for clinicians to better understand the impact of forced adoption and respond appropriately in their care. The NHS England will also explore how those who wish to do so can have their experience of forced adoption appropriately recorded in their health record. And finally, to further recognise those affected and ensure we learn the lessons of the past, we will commission a testimonials project to capture the stories of those with experience of historic forced adoption practices. Through all of this and more, we will continue to meet regularly with those with lived experience, guided by them to get this support right, to learn from our past and ensure that nothing like this can ever happen in this country again. Finally, Mr. Speaker, this national apology reflects and builds on the approaches taken by Scotland and Wales, whose devolved governments have also issued apologies for these practices, which we fully endorse. And I welcome the process underway in Northern Ireland to establish a statutory public inquiry into mother and baby institutions, Magdalene laundries and workhouses. And I also want to thank the Joint Committee on Human Rights and the Education Select Committee for all they've done to shine a light on this injustice. But most of all, I want to thank those who have campaigned for so long to have the truth recognised, including those who are no longer with us, to hear this apology that they fought for. It should never have happened, and you should not have had to fight so hard for this day to come. But today, finally, I do say on behalf of the state and on behalf of the nation as a whole, we see you, we hear you, and we are truly sorry. I commend this statement to the House, Mr. Speaker.
Shadow Secretary of State Alex Burkhardt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the Prime Minister for advance side of his statement and also for coming to the House to deliver this statement himself. On behalf of His Majesty's opposition, we welcome very much what he has said and agree that whenever the state makes grave errors, it has a deep responsibility to apologise for what it did to those that it has wronged. 185,000 children grew up in Britain without their mothers because of bad decisions and fundamentally flawed beliefs that treated unmarried mothers with a shame and stigma that today is mercifully alien to us. But those decisions and those beliefs have left a permanent mark on each and every one of those lives, on children separated from their mothers and on the mothers whose children were taken away. As the Prime Minister said, this is a stain on our history. Bonds between mothers and children are the foundation of security and identity, indeed perhaps the foundation of all we have. And whilst I know from very much experience that the act of adopting a child is amongst the greatest kindness one person can show another, and that many of those children will have gone on to be raised by loving families, there can be no doubt that they will also have carried a great grief across many years. One cannot help to be moved by the very powerful testimonies that some have given. I remember just one. The journey back from the hospital was the longest I held my daughter. It was 2 hours, and it was like everything suddenly made sense. I just felt like this was absolutely right, and I wouldn't let go of her. A woman appeared and said, "It's time," and she was taken from my arms and handed over. And the baby howled, I assume I did, and the following week they sent me back to school. Thousands upon thousands of such experiences happening every day in every corner of our country over many years. Thankfully, in the years since, a huge amount has been done to ensure that such things cannot happen again in our country. change in adoption law and modern courts and legislation make a repeat of these injustices very much less likely. So we welcome the steps that the Prime Minister has outlined today. We very much welcome the fact that the Education Secretary is writing to local authorities and agencies, setting the expectation that requests for records should be swiftly responded to. I'm glad that that builds on the steps the last government tried to take to improve access to adoption records, offer post-adoption counselling and improve the complaints procedure for agencies. All of these steps, we hope, will make a difference to some of those experiences, some of those whose experiences lie in the past, and many in the future. While the state, I would like to ask the Prime Minister, if I may, just a small number of questions. The Education Select Committee called for an assessment of international redress schemes. Can the Prime Minister confirm whether the government is considering this? I very much welcome the Prime Minister's announcement of support groups for mothers and adopted adults. Could he tell us who will be responsible for establishing this service and what budget will be set aside for it? But I thank the Prime Minister very much for his statement and repeat what he has said to those affected. The shame was never yours.
Well, could I thank him for the tone of his response and for the welcome for what the government set out today, and thank him for the care and attention that he has shown to this issues and linked issues personally. And can I say to him and the whole House that I genuinely believe it is so important that we speak with one voice in this House today, so that those affected know this is an apology from all of us in equal measure, and that it is a united House on an issue like this. And thank him for leading in that way, because it impacts not us in this chamber, it impacts all those who've been affected by this, to know that this whole House supports the apology that's given today, and the way it's being given is really important to them, and I do thank him for that. In relation to his questions, we are looking at schemes. We are being guided by those affected as the support that they think is most important to them, and will continue to be guided in that way. And as for responsibility, he asked, that will be the Department for Education, but I'm very happy to provide him with further information as these things develop. Thank you.
Chair of the Select Committee, Helen Hayes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The evidence the Education Select Committee heard from mothers and adult adoptees was utterly devastating. I want to thank Diana de Vries, Anne Lloyd-Keane, Sally Ells and Debbie Iromlu for courageously reliving their trauma so that we could shine a light on the extent of the injustice they suffered and the urgency of the need for a meaningful response. They should not have had to work so hard for so long just to be heard and to have their experiences recognised. I also want to thank the academics who gave evidence, and especially Professor Harold Gordon and Dr. Michael Lambert, whose painstaking and rigorous research helped to prove what mothers and adult adoptees have long known, that the state was culpable for the wrongs they suffered by presiding over, funding and facilitating a system that systematically dehumanised unmarried pregnant women and their babies and inflicted horrific cruelty upon them. I thank the Prime Minister for this apology today. It is long overdue and much needed. I thank him for the breadth of the apology and for the work the government has done with survivors to get to this point. Women whose babies were forcibly adopted and who endured cruelty and humiliation in mother and baby homes and in the NHS should know today that the shame of this period in our history rests on the government and on religious and community and healthcare organisations who presided over, facilitated and sustained this system. It is not theirs to carry, and it never was theirs to carry. This apology, Madam Deputy Speaker, is a watershed, but it must be only the beginning of putting right the disgraceful wrongs of this shameful period of our history. So can I ask the Prime Minister to set out how progress on delivering the support that he has announced today will be monitored, and how survivors will continue to be involved in it? And can I ask him to make sure, as the government progresses this work, that information on how to access this support is made widely available? Because, Madam Deputy Speaker, so many families have a story. There are so many stories that are still untold, so many who still feel ashamed to speak about this period in their lives and the lifelong impact of it. And they must no longer feel ashamed. They must feel that they can come forward and access the help and support that they need.
Well, can I thank her for all the work that she has done on this, and that she has led through the Education Committee and all the members of that committee. I heard about the testimony to the committee and how difficult and harrowing it was for all concerned, and she's absolutely right to thank those who gave their testimony to the committee and those who supported the work of the committee. She used the word dehumanised, and that is the right word, although it hardly feels strong enough to me. To break the bond between a mother and a child is nothing less than dehumanising. It goes to an intense feeling that we all have as human beings, and to break that bond is indescribably painful, even to describe, let alone to have gone through. So dehumanising is the right word, and not just the initial act and all the pain and anguish, but then, as I discussed with those in the gallery this morning, the everyday reminders. Do you have children? What a difficult and awful question to answer over and over again. They've all come to terms with how they'll answer that question. A question we all hear, we all pose on a daily or weekly basis. Just really struck me this morning as such a simple everyday thing, but such a painful thing. And there'll be so many, thousands of those across all of the testimonies and all of the stories. In relation to her questions, the monitoring will be by the Department of Education. We will, of course, involve survivors as we go forward, and I've no doubt the committee will want to monitor that itself and to be updated regularly. And the point she makes about making the support widely known is so important, because there are many thousands who need the support and they need to know it's available. And I'm acutely conscious, as I said during the statement, there are some who've still not been able to speak about this to this day. And I'd hope that by making it widely available and widely known, the support, that may help some of them to feel that they can come forward and get the support they need. Thank you.